Robert and Linda have hunted a first home for years, and Uncle Bill shows them the news. The Senate just passed the biggest housing bill in 30 years. 89-10, Democrat and Republican together. It lands as the median home hits $440,000, nearly triple its early 2000s price. Washington finally acted, so prices have to come down. But read the fine print. It spends nothing, builds nothing itself, and its toughest move, capping the big investors, stops at 350 homes almost no one hits. But the real lock isn't a law at all. It's one number sitting in millions of homes that no vote in Congress can reach. I'm Uncle Bill, and in this video, I'll show Robert and his wife Linda why that historic law can't move a single price. I walk him past the usual blame, zoning, the crashes, the investors it targets, to the real lock. The homes already exist. Their owners just won't sell. By the end, you'll see why 8 in 10 refuse to list, and the one lever that thaws the market, and why it belongs to the Fed, not Congress. Robert and Linda are both around 40, still renting after years of trying to buy. Uncle Bill pulls up the number that stops them cold. The median American home now runs about $440,000, nearly triple what Robert's parents paid a generation ago. Robert's paycheck has climbed too, but every raise gets swallowed before it closes any of the gap. So they figure they're just a little behind, a few good years from the down payment. The typical first-time buyer has aged from their late 20s to a record 40, Robert's exact age. And first-timers are now the smallest share of the market ever measured, just 21%, barely 1 in 5 sales. Robert isn't behind by a few years. A whole generation got locked out at once, and the door kept drifting away. But expensive is a feeling. There's an old rule that tells you exactly how far past the line we've gone, and it's been shattered. Uncle Bill hands Robert the yardstick every generation used. A house should cost about 3 times what you make in a year. On that rule, Robert's roughly $60,000 income points to a $180,000 home, a number that doesn't exist in his market anymore. He scrolls the listings, expecting something near that old line, even a fixer-upper. Linda remembers her parents buying exactly that way. One income, about 3 years of pay, done. They assume the rule still roughly holds, and they're just shopping in a pricey year. But the median home today isn't 3 times income, it's more than 5 times it, and climbing. The monthly payment on that median house now demands a 6-figure salary to carry comfortably, nearly double what Robert earns. The measuring stick everyone trusted for decades doesn't even reach the price anymore. The tool broke, not the shopper. Robert ran the exact math his parents did and came up a whole tier short. Robert asks the obvious question, why did this happen? Uncle Bill gives him the answer he'll hear everywhere. We simply never built enough. For 50 straight years, more people have wanted homes than there were homes to buy. When demand always beats supply, price only moves one direction. Left and right, buyer and builder, everyone agrees on the one diagnosis. Too few houses, full stop. And it's the exact diagnosis the biggest housing law in 30 years was written to fix. But if the whole problem is too few houses, the next question is why we can't just build them. And the answer is written into the land itself. Robert figures there's open land everywhere. So why not just build? Uncle Bill tells him the land was claimed before a single shovel moved. In city after city, you legally cannot build anything but one detached house on most of the residential land. On top of that, sit the permits, the environmental reviews, the neighbor hearings, each project a years-long slog. A single apartment plan can die in review after review before one wall goes up. Robert still assumes builders could catch up if they just hustled harder. But the wall isn't effort, it's the law. Roughly 75% of residential land in most American cities is zoned for single-family homes only. 3 of every 4 lots off limits to a duplex, a townhouse, or an apartment. So catching up on supply isn't hard. It's outlawed on most of the ground you'd have to use. The shortage was written into the zoning map long before any builder showed up. But zoning was always the slow leak. 2 sudden shocks turned the shortage into a crisis. First came the 2008 crash. Home building collapsed and never fully recovered. For years after, almost nothing new came online while the population kept right on growing. Then COVID hit and construction froze again, and Robert lived through both crashes without ever tying them to his own locked-out house. After 2008, builders pulled back for a decade. Millions of missing homes that never got dug back out. 2 blows, a decade apart, stacked on top of the zoning leak, the gap became a wall. But there's one more player everyone points to, and this is the one the new law was built to stop. Robert's sure he already knows the real villain: Wall Street firms buying up all the houses. Uncle Bill tells him it's newer than he thinks. As recently as late 2011, not a single investor owned even 1,000 single-family homes. Then Wall Street noticed, and firms started buying houses in bulk with all-cash offers. By 2015, they held hundreds of thousands of single-family homes. Robert and Linda got outbid twice by exactly this: cash buyers who beat their mortgage offer in a single day. But this is the exact villain the new law was built to punish. In just a few years, investors went from owning 0 homes at scale to controlling hundreds of thousands. They outbid ordinary families who need a mortgage and a month to close. The cash offer wins every time. So they became the clear villain of the whole story. Corporations turning homes into portfolios. But now put it together: a shortage, choked land, and cash-rich investors, because the biggest housing law in 30 years was written to hit all three at once. Uncle Bill lays the bill on the table: the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, passed by the Senate 89-10. Elizabeth Warren and Tim Scott, a Democrat and a Republican, backing the same law on the same stage. It streamlines permitting and pushes cities to loosen zoning so more homes can get built. It opens the door to manufactured homes and turns vacant buildings into housing. And it caps the big investors. Anyone holding more than 350 single-family homes gets forced to sell them off. But look at that list. It answers every single thing Robert just learned was wrong. Build more, free the land, kick out the corporations. On paper, it's the exact fix everyone screamed for. But look closely at that investor cap, because the moment you do, the whole rescue starts to fall apart. Uncle Bill points back at the one move Robert loved most, the one forcing big investors to sell, and asks how much it really moves his odds. Institutional investors owning 1,000-plus homes are a small slice of the national market, packed into a handful of Sunbelt cities. In most towns, they aren't bidding on most houses at all, and the cap doesn't even bite until an investor holds 350 homes, a line almost none of them cross. Robert still expects that kicking them out frees up a flood of houses on his own street. But capping them makes a great headline and barely moves the price on Robert's block. The villain was never the whole story. Take the investors out entirely, and the shortage on most streets barely budges. The bill's toughest weapon lands on a target that was never crowding out most families. So if the investors weren't the real lock, what froze the market solid right now? But if it's not really the investors and building new homes takes years, then why is the market frozen solid right now? Uncle Bill flips Robert's whole picture. The houses you need already exist. They're just not for sale. Existing homes already standing make up around 90% of everything that sells in a given year. Builders add only a thin slice on top of that. New construction is the small box in the back, not the store shelves. So the number that decides whether Robert can buy isn't how many homes get built. It's how many owners choose to list. No matter how many new roofs go up, 9 of every 10 homes that sell already exist. A year of building barely moves that dial. The shortage strangling Robert isn't unbuilt houses, it's unsold ones. Which means the real question was never why don't we build, but why won't owners sell? To keep the economy alive through COVID, the Federal Reserve slashed interest rates to almost zero. Through 2020 and 2021, a huge wave of Americans bought a home or refinanced the one they had. They locked in mortgages at 2 or 3%, the cheapest home loans in living memory. At the time, it barely registered as a big deal. Just a nice rate. But that nice rate was about to become the single most important number in their financial life. Millions of owners froze a 2 to 3% mortgage in place, a price on money that may never come back. But a 3% mortgage only matters once you see what happened to rates right after. Say you own a home at 3% and want the identical house across the street. Sell and you finance the new one at today's 7%. That swap can nearly double your monthly payment for the exact same house. You'd pay hundreds or thousands more a month just to move sideways. Linda gets it instantly. So nobody saying sells, they'd be punished for moving. But every owner who runs that math makes the same choice: stay put. So they don't move and their house never hits the market. Multiply one frozen owner by a whole country and the trade nobody will make becomes a market nobody can buy into. Robert finally sees it. The empty listings aren't a building problem. They're millions of people refusing a terrible trade. But this only freezes housing if it's happening to almost everyone at once. So how many owners are actually locked in? Robert guesses it's a small group of lucky owners. Uncle Bill shows him it's nearly universal. Around 80% of American mortgages carry a rate under 6%. Half of all mortgages are locked at 4% or below. 1 in 5 sits under 3%, the deepest discount there ever was. Robert had pictured maybe a handful of owners sitting pretty. But that's 8 of every 10 homeowners holding a rate they'd be crazy to give up. 8 in 10 owners have a concrete dollars every month reason never to list their house. The supply didn't disappear, it quietly locked itself in place, one cheap mortgage at a time. On Robert's own street, nearly every door is frozen shut for the very same reason. But now go back to that historic law, because this is exactly where the biggest housing bill in 30 years slams into a wall. The bill can push builders, rewrite zoning, and force investors to sell. All of that is real. But there's one move nothing in it can make. Get a single homeowner to give up a 3% mortgage. No law can reach into that kitchen table decision. Robert waits for the loophole. Surely Congress can do something about it. But the only lever that actually thaws the market, interest rates, doesn't belong to Congress at all. It belongs to the Federal Reserve, not a single vote in the Senate. So the paradox resolves. The biggest housing law in 30 years can't lower Robert's price because the lock isn't a law, it's a rate. Washington passed the rescue everyone demanded and doesn't hold the one key that opens the door. But the cruelest part isn't that the lock is out of reach, it's what that lock actually is. That 2 to 3% mortgage was the deal of a lifetime, the cheapest money most people will ever touch. And it's the exact thing holding them hostage. It's too good to walk away from, so it chains its owner to a house they may have long outgrown. The young family that needs a bigger place stays crammed in the starter home just to keep the rate. Robert always assumed a great rate was pure good luck for whoever got it. But by staying put, each of those owners keeps one more home off the market for buyers exactly like Robert. Golden handcuffs. The gift became the cage, a rate too good to give up that quietly locks its owner in place. The cheap money that broke housing on the way up is the same cheap money freezing it shut on the way down. Robert sees the whole loop close. The thing everyone envied is the thing keeping him locked out. Robert asks the blunt question. If it can't lower his price, was the whole law just theater? Uncle Bill. No, and here's the honest part. Biggest housing law in 30 years and won't lower your price this year are both true at once. The bill was built for the slow problem, the decade-long shortage, not the frozen one. Robert had assumed a big law should fix things now, this year. But loosening zoning, backing manufactured homes, and converting empty offices into apartments is real. It just pays off over a decade, not a season. Those changes genuinely help build the houses the country never built. It's aimed at the next family's down payment, not this year's frozen market. A good law for the long haul that was never going to unfreeze today's block. But that leaves the only question that actually matters to you. If a law can't thaw it, what will? The answer isn't a vote. It's a drift. The market unlocks only when interest rates ease back down. As rates fall, the gap between a frozen 3% and today's rate shrinks. But here's what that means for you, sitting on the outside of all of it, waiting to buy your first home. Robert waits for Uncle Bill to name the villain one last time, and the answer isn't a law at all. The biggest housing law in a generation passed almost unanimously, and the real lock on Robert's first home was never a missing law. It was a mortgage nobody will give up, a frozen 3% rate no vote can reach, which changes where Robert looks, not to Washington for the rescue. He'd spent years waiting on Congress to fix it for him. But the openings aren't in Washington, they're in the cracks. The freeze itself is quietly prying open. The owners who must move anyway, a job, a divorce, a death, put homes back on the market no matter the rate. Some of those low-rate loans can be taken over by the buyer at the old low rate. The lock finally working for Robert instead of against him. And the thaw has already started. The first homes are trickling back as rates slip. The door was never locked by a missing law, it was held shut by a rate. So stop watching Washington and watch where the ice is already cracking open.